Now we're on the top of Chavtes Amud Beis. Shmuel halacha l'maisa asa lashmein. In other words, if you were to ask Shmuel, halacha l'maisa, am I allowed to measure kemach? Shmuel would say it's also. However, the Bryce is telling you what the theoretical halacha is, meaning if she went ahead and she measured it, we're not going to make a macha. We're not going to protest and bang our hands on the table and say this is prohibited. And this, my friends, we've touched on this in the past. It's a methodology that's called halacha v'ein morid. I mean, sometimes you have a theoretical heter or leniency according to the strict abstract halacha, but we don't rule in actuality according to that leniency. We don't reflect that kula. We're always afraid that, you know what, if we allow her to measure out the flour, then who knows what, she's going to measure out everything. When really this was a special heter with regard to challah in the case of flour and water and kneading a dough. Now we get to the sugya, what's called nipui kemach on yontif. What does that mean? That when they made flour out of kernels of wheat, for example, they needed to do what's called nipui. Nipui means sifting. In order to get rid of what's called the subin, they want to get rid of those particles and those, bran. Today we eat bran, but in those days they didn't like bran. They wanted refined flour. And the question is, are you allowed to do the sifting on yontif for the sake of ochel nefesh? Because you want to prepare with this flour, bread. So the general rule here that we have to know by an introduction is that malacha, which you could have done on Erev Yontif at no loss, we're not going to allow you to do it on Yontif. Tana Rabbanan. Ein shonin kemach b'yontif. Okay. Now, this brisa addresses a more sophisticated and specific question. For sure, we're not going to allow you to sift kemach on yontif. There's no sifting on yontif. But what they used to do is they did a double sifting. So she, in fact, sifted the flour on Erev Yontif, which is fine. And then on Yontif, she wanted to do what's called shonin. Shonin means to repeat. There was very little soles. There was very little klipa that was left, but there might have been a little amount. So in order to make it refined upon refined, she would take a sifter that had smaller holes, and she would do a second time on Yontif. So the Brisa says that you're not allowed to do that. But Mishum Rabbi Fafius, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, Amru Shonin, we're going to allow her to do a second sifting if she did the first one on Erev Yontif and the second one on Yontif. Why is that? Because when you do the first sifting, that's a tircha gedola. You really have to work very hard. The second sifting is almost mechanical. It's kal with a kuf. It's relatively light. There's no great tircha involved. And not only that, but everybody sees that this nipui is only to beautify the flour, to bring it up to a higher level. Like if you read the box, of the flour, they'll boast about the fact that we did a second nipui, a second sifting. But that's not the real sifting, and the Rabbanan never asked. But that's the shita of Pafiris. She'im nafal of the shovin, even the Tanakama will agree, he will concede, that in one case it's mutter. What happened? Nafal esochan tzraro kesam biyontif. What happens if she did the nipui kedasuk yibin on Erev Yontif, but on Yontif itself, something fell into the flour, and now she's got to get it out. A tzrar fell in a kesan, either a small pebble or a piece of wood, is shown, and then we're going to allow her to do a second nipui to get rid of that which fell in on Yontif, because you can't say, well, why didn't you do it on Erev Yontif when this situation arose as a result of something that fell into the flour on Yontif? Tani Tana Kami to Ravina. We have a chacham who would always bring a bryce in front of Ravina, and in this case, Ravina was not happy with the bryce. What is the bryce? Says ain't shown in kemach biyontif. We're not going to allow you. This reflects sheet Tanakama before the previous bryce that a repeat nipui is not allowed. Avol nafal tzvaro kesam orer biyod. He's not allowed to use a sieve It looks like a malacha. This is called meleches meraked. Meraked is sifting in the list of 39 malachas in Shabbos Perikov. But what we will allow is that you pull out the tzrar or the kisem that fell in on Yom Tov. Ravina says this makes no sense. This is inconsistent. Ravina says to that chacham who brought the brayso to his attention, according to you, you're not allowed to do a second sifting. Why? Because that too looks like meraked, and we're not going to allow it on Yom Tov. Is kolshke the asur? Certainly, we're not going to allow you to put your hand in to the kemach and figure out where you could take the tzvar or the kisam out. There's another malacha in addition to meraked, which is sifting. There's a malacha called borer. You're not allowed to take soles out of ochel. So how could you consistently say that we're not allowing you to do a nipui, even though it's a second round because it looks like meraked, but we're allowing you to pull out that which fell in with your hand? That's nirik borer. Dorash Rav Bar Rav Huna Zute. Again, there was the great Rav Huna, the older Rav Zute, the elder, and then there was the younger one. Pischa de Narda, when he entered into Narda. Now, when you give a drasha, when you enter into a city, you dramatize it. Because you're like publicizing, wow, I have something very important to share with you. And what did he say? Shodin kemach b'yontif. We allow you to do a second sifting on Yontif. You did the first one on Erev Yontif, second on Yontif. Amalu Rav Nachman. Poku v'imru leili Abba. Abba here is a word that means not my biological father, but my friend. Abba. Sometimes you call tatala. You're my friend. And tell Rava Bar Hafuna. Now here he pushes it off with an idiomatic phrase. Shkila tuvisa ushdia chizre. Okay, we'll interpret it literally one by one. But first, let me give you the flavor of this idiomatic phrase. Take your gift and put it on top of thorns, meaning I don't need to have access to your chidush. You didn't add anything to my knowledge that I didn't know. So shkila tivuscha, take your tova, your great contribution, and shdi and throw it on chizri. Chizri means on a thorn bush. Because all I have to do is look and see what women do, what the lady folk are doing on Yantiv. Puk chazi, go out and see. Kama mahulasa hadrin bin ardoi. How many times do we see hadrasa means the second round, a repeat of Nipui, is going on in the city of Narda? In other words, every Yantiv, women are doing the second Nipui on Yantiv. We know this. This is public knowledge. We know you're allowed to do the repeat Nipui on Yantiv. You didn't add anything and enhance that knowledge. The Bisu, the Rav Yosef. We always talk about the Fruma women, the women, Ashes Chayil. Back in Europe, the women took upon themselves different chumras. And here's another example of a chumrah that was taken on by the wife of Rav Yosef, the Rebbitzin of Rav Yosef. Okay, we're going to write a book called Rav Yosef's Rebbitzin, Teachings of Rav Yosef's Rebbitzin. Niala Kimcha, she did a repeat performance of Nipui on Yom Tov, but she was very careful about it. She did not allow it just regular, Agaba de Mahulas. The sieve has two parts to it. And one is the back part. That's the part where she turned it basically upside down. And she did it on what's called the Gav HaNipui. The Gav HaNapui. And there she was demonstrating that really this is not so simple to permit this. It's not smooth. Amar Rav Yosef says to his wife, Chazi, I want you to check out the Anor Rifta Mihali Savim. Oh, I want a good piece of bread. Meaning basically, he was telling her that she didn't have to do the strange kind of niput, which would have less than 100% results. He wanted refined bread on Yom Tov. fine flour. Interesting, no? That the Rebbetzin was machmir, she wanted a shinui upon the repeat nipui, and her husband said it's not necessary. However, here's another story with the opposite conclusion. The Beitza of Rav Ashi, the Rebbetzin of Rav Ashi, Niala Kimcha, when she did a second repeat nipuch of Kemach, Agaba de Psora, she did it on the back of the table. Now I'm going to read to you the Hebrew translation. I'm going to try to do the best I can. Exactly how do you do sifting on it on the back of a table? I don't know. But here's what he says. Hainu, shahafcha es daf hashulchan, v'kimla es hakemach, al achorov, b'makom shashulayim sovavim es hashulchan, v'yesh ba beis kibul. This is all based on Rashi. So if I understand correctly, the table was made up of two parts. There was the tabletop, and then there was a wider area on the bottom that extended, and it created kind of a receptacle. And she would use that receptacle and push the kemach against that receptacle, and part of it would fall to the side, and part of it she was able to collect in the receptacle. A very strange, unusual way of doing sifting. Or Rav Ashi, and when Rav Ashi heard about this unusual shinui that his wife instituted, he said, Hadidain, ours, meaning my wife, Brate de Rami Bar Chama. She's the daughter of my shver, my father-in-law, the great Rami Bar Chama. Rami Bar Chama, by the way, appears left, right, and center in Shas, all over the place. The Rami Bar Chama, Mari Dovadaha, she learned it from her father. He was the one who instructed her to implement this unusual shina of using the gav hashul. The lav de chazim b'beit nasha, if she hadn't seen it in the house of her father, lavi avda, she wouldn't have done it. She wouldn't have taken upon herself to invent new halachas and new shinuyim. This shinu was something that she had inherited as a legacy from her father. The Mefarshim think that there's a machlokas here between Rav Yosef and Rav Ashi. Do we need a shinui or do we not need a shinui on the second nipui on Yom Tov? However, everybody agrees that really, strictly according to the din, you don't need a shinui, and therefore, as the Rosh points out, this is called a shinui kal. It's a relatively secondary kind of shinui. It's not radical, it's not revolutionary, and the question is whether you need to bother with it at all. And this leads us to the last Mishnah in the third parak. I'm sorry, in the, what are we up to? The second parak. What are we up to? I forget. Oh, the third parak, right? The third parak of Beitza, sorry. If, let's say, you're a reliable buyer, a client, you always buy from a certain seller, you're allowed to go over to him, the omerlo, and say to him, this is the buyer talking to the seller, Tainli Beitzim vegozim b'min. Give me 10 eggs or 2 dozen eggs. And this is not considered mekach, derech mekach, umemkach, it's not a ma'aseh, it's not prohibited, even though what he means is, I'll pay you the value of 10 eggs or 20 eggs, whatever the number is. Shekain derech balabayis lios mone b'sof beisa. Because even if a person was counting eggs in order to calculate how much he needs in his house, you know, he's got X number of cooking and he needs Y number of eggs, he counts them. And he speaks out dominion. He makes a declaration even during the week, even if it's not for mekach umemkar purpose, but simply in order to get the kitchen functioning properly, he will indicate the number of eggs that he needs. The Beitza, quoted by the Gemara, says, a person is a regular client to buy animals from a shepherd, a regular etzlo, and the shepherd believes him, he trusts him, without telling him, hey, you know, you're going to have to pay me X. So they don't mention the amount of money that the lokech is going to have to pay for an animal. The buyer says, give me 1 kid. One sheep. Or, for example, a person is a regular client and trustworthy Eitzel Tabach, the butcher, A regular. It's miyomalo tainli kaf achas. Give me one flank, one pulka. Oh, yerechechas, an entire thought. And you're allowed to do this on Yom Tov. And it's not considered derech mekach. Eitzel patam. Patam is the chicken seller. He used to fatten up the chickens. That's why he's called a patam. Lefatem ofos. A regular. So he's a regular. V'yomalo tainli tar echad. Sell me one turtle dove. Or gozelech, one pigeon. Or eitzel nachtom. Here the word nachtom means literally a baker, a professional baker. Rogel Etzlo, he's a good client, reliable. Omelo tainli kikar echad. I need one loaf of bread. Gluska achas al chala, large chala. Another example of the Eitzel Chenfania Rogelo, he always buys merchandise from a certain seller. Yomalon, he says to him, tainli esrin beitzim or chamish megozim. I need 20 eggs. I guess they didn't count dozens then, they counted by tens. Or 50 egozim or walnuts, asora farsikin, 10 peaches, chamisha rimonim, and 5 pomegranates, esrogecho and esrog, ubilvad shlo yaskelo schum mida. As long as he doesn't indicate the volume, like I want a kav of a certain commodity, which is like a weight or a volume. And Allah Omer mut. You're allowed to even mention exactly the volume that you want. It's not that I want, let's say, 1 loaf of bread. I want 10 pounds of bread. What creates the shinu here on Yom Tov? He doesn't mention an amount of money that he's going to pay. Adon alecha ein sodden. So we have 3 minutes left to learn the first Mishnah in the 4th parak. This Mishnah is an extension of what we learned before, that you're not allowed to do on Yom Tov a Masechet. Hamevi kadeyayim mimokom lemokom. He is transporting barrels of wine from one place to the other. Obviously, they're both within the tchum, so he's not going chutz to tchum. But lo yavien betoch sal ubekupa. He shouldn't do it the way he does it during the week. He's got a massive amount. He's got 3 barrels worth of wine, or 4 barrels worth, and he puts it in this gigantic basket. When he carries that basket with so much wine in it, it looks like a Masechet. It looks like something that, let's say, a seller would do if he was selling in the marketplace volumes of wine. So he carries it in the sal or the kupa. I have this shiloh, by the way, all the time because I'm in charge of bringing the cookies for the kiddush. You can thank me later. But this is already 8 years. I'm the ELC cookie transporter man for the kiddush. And I'm always nervous about putting, let's say I have to carry not only the cookies, but also I carry certain svarim for the shiurim that I'm going to give during the course of the morning, or the drasha that I'm going to give. So I don't want to put it in my briefcase that I use the whole week long. It's pogea in the Kedushas HaShabbos or Kedushas Yom. It's nirek Masechet. So we have we call it a bubby car, a bubby trolley, those things on the 2 wheels, that's where we put everything in. Biyuchad l'Shabbos. Aval mevihu, he's allowed to carry al ktefo on his shoulders, or lefanov, or in his hands against his chest. And then he's taking only a smaller amount, let's say 2 barrels of wine. And that's not considered a Masechet, because you see, obviously, this is what he's doing on Yom Tov for the sake of Yom Tov. And so too, a molich es hateven, if he's transporting, it's called straw, and he's transporting straw for the purpose of feeding his fire because he's cooking on Yom Tov, then lo yafshil es hakupa leachorov. He shouldn't put it like a knapsack over his back, a knapsack full of straw, because that's already Masechet. Aval mevio hu biyad, but whatever he can carry by his hand, that he's allowed to do, because then it's quite obvious to the spectator that it's l'tzorech Yom Tov. Now, once the Mishnah already discusses the heter, that you're allowed to be molech tevet biyontif in a shina in an unusual way, so the Tana now is going to continue by discussing what we touched on earlier about stalks, well, I shouldn't say stalks, stacks of straw, and it's muktzah. Why is it muktzah? Umaschilin, here we turn to Daf Lamed, bi'aremas hateven. He can begin to take straw out of this great haystack of straw, a straw stack, for the purpose of burning his fire. Avalo eitzim shebamukta, but if he keeps his straw or his logs of wood stored behind his house, he has a sort of a storage area beyond his house. That means he did not designate it for use for his fire as combustible fuel, and therefore it's mukt. Okay, then, so this is where we're going to stop for today. And in Mitzvah tomorrow, same time, same place, we'll begin the Gemara here on the top of Daf Lamed Amud Aleph. So I'll take this opportunity to wish you all a great day. And hopefully we'll see couple and we'll be able to give him a bon voyage in the future before he leaves on Yom Rishon. Okay, see you tomorrow.